sheep without a shepherd, they really need a leader. A few years ago in the Middle East, and I should have looked the details up again, but I forgot. They had a situation where literally hundreds of sheep plunged to their death over a cliff. One went over and everybody else followed. And about half of them survived, but only because they landed on top of the other half who did not survive. To be a sheep without a shepherd means you really need a leader for your life. And I say all that to say that the world is full of trouble. That's what's going on in the world, and that's why I've come up here to see if I can help do anything about that. In addition to that, and did everybody get a note sheet? If you didn't get a note sheet, raise your hand, and Michelle will magically give you one. Will you? However,
I don't know about magic, but.
Okay. And we're on Roman numeral 2 here, and I don't know if there's any pencils around. Did we do pencils today? There's some blanks to fill in if you want to fill in some blanks. But on Roman numeral 2, Jesus also said that these people were a harvest. He said that the people were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and he said they were a harvest. Now we all know what a literal harvest is, and the Bible uses harvest as a metaphor in a couple of different ways to refer to a couple of different things. I'm pretty sure here the meaning is that they were open to entering the kingdom of God. And if you want to later, you can compare that passage in John chapter 4 that talks about there being a great harvest, and that others had done the work and you're entering into their harvest. So Jesus looks at these people and he calls them a harvest. In fact, he even says the harvest is plentiful. And I wanted to stop for a second and ask you kind of what do you think about that statement, but more so, do you think there is a harvest in Charlestown? Do you think there's a harvest in, what's the name of our county here? Jefferson County. Do you think there's a harvest in your neighborhood? And I don't know that I necessarily think Jesus' statement is a statement of truth for all times and all places. Maybe it is. But I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it applies here today? Do you think there's a harvest around you? Scott?
Just from the idea of having no shepherd, they needed a leader. And the shepherd, of course, not only provided them as the 23rd Psalm, places to eat and places to lie down with protection. And so they're either going to be harvested by the Lord or they're going to be devoured by the lion. And so it's going to be a harvest either way.
Okay.
They're either going to be harvested by the lion or they're going to be led by the shepherd.
Okay. Yeah.
To better places.
Yeah. Okay.
So
The need,
that would apply to everybody.
yeah, the need is definitely there. Yeah. Okay, who else? Do you think there's a harvest around you? Is there a harvest in your neighborhood? Is there a harvest in Jefferson County? Getting some nods, I'm getting some blank stares. I'm getting huh?
I'm always blank.
You're all, don't take that personal. I know what you're saying. I wanted to announce that Michelle was already yawning on the way to church. We wanted to make clear that she was not yawning because of hearing the class. And I don't see her now. Apparently she's found a place to go lie down, catch up a little. But what about it? Do you think, are people open to God? Do you think they're open to God? Is there a harvest? If harvest here means open to entering the kingdom of God, is there a harvest today? Anybody else want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, since this pandemic, opened a lot of doors, a lot
Okay.
of opportunities
Okay.
for people, and to let them know, you know, if you die, it's gain.
Yeah.
If you're right with the Lord.
Yeah.
If, you know, you have nothing to
Yeah. I think the hardships are a blessing in a way because they make us aware of our need. So, yeah, Scott.
A harvest also implies that there has been some growth.
Okay.
So we know the seed is the word. So in some ways, the harvest, it's not ready, nobody's ready to be harvested unless some seed has been planted
Okay.
first.
Yeah. I'll say, yes, sir.
I gotta believe that there's a harvest pretty much everywhere we go in this country, not only Charlestown and Jefferson County, our neighborhoods and wherever. I think anytime you see more establishments that people call the church, and you see more of those than you see McDonald's, there's obviously people who are seeking the truth. Now that truth that they think that they're getting in a lot of different other, denominations and things like that, is obviously inaccurate. So it kind of goes back to what Scott was saying, where there's a harvest, and it's just who you're gonna be harvested by.
Okay. Yeah.
Because obviously, like I said, with denominations, there's a seed that's been planted. Now, what type of seed that is questionable,
Yeah.
obviously, but there is a harvest and an opportunity to plant a different seed
Okay.
in those people.
So kind of like they feel the need for something and they will find something somewhere, may
Right.
not find what they really need.
Right.
I think about it, I don't know how y'all are here, but in a lot of churches I've been, and people aren't exactly beating down the doors to get in. We still got a little room left here this morning, and I don't know if y'all have people drop in very often or not. But there's a part of me that wants to say, in fact, I've concluded this a couple of times, I don't think there is a harvest today. It doesn't seem like anybody's interested. But I've taken a closer look at this passage and I've come to a different conclusion. And you're going to want to write this down. This is really profound. Verse 37 comes after verse 36. Just go ahead and write that down. I'm kidding. Verse 37 mentions the harvest, but it says that right after verse 36, when it describes the people as harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And some of y'all said this, because of what people are like, there is a harvest. As long as verse 36 is true, verse 37 is going to be true. As long as people are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, they will be open. And a couple of you have pointed out, maybe open to craziness, but there's some openness there. And then the other thing I saw that you'll also want to write down is that verse 36 comes right after verse 35. And again, I think there's a connection. There's a crowd of people gathered there, and that is stated right after you hear this description of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is going everywhere, teaching and preaching the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. And out of that, a crowd gathers. And I believe people are still attracted to Jesus. Now, they don't necessarily understand him. They put all kinds of their own expectations on him and all kinds of things like that. But I do think that people are still, I got kind of behind my presentation here. I think people are still open to Jesus today. And again, that doesn't mean they're going to be beating down the doors of our church buildings necessarily. But if they've got problems, they're going to see the need for something. And if they're attracted to Jesus, there is going to be some openness there. And I think, I'm just going to assume that you struggle with this too. We're here. We've got what they need. Where are they? Why aren't they coming here? And I guess the thing I want to say about that is, unless your church is cooler than Jesus, the church shouldn't be the primary attraction anyway, should it? Shouldn't Jesus be the attraction? And I think it's okay to say this: if I be lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. I think he meant that kind of literally, you know, lifted up on the cross. But I think if we lift him up to people, it will draw people to him. And then we need to make sure that they get into the church. Now, I realize he's the one that adds them to the church, but we may have to hold their hand and bring them, you know, to be a part of us and to bring them to worship. So what I'm thinking is, yeah, the society may not be beating down the doors to the church buildings anymore, but they're still broken and they're still attracted to Jesus. If we can communicate Jesus to them, they can be harvested. And when they are, we can teach them about church and how to come in. And frankly, I would rather do that. I would rather have the opportunity to teach them first and then bring them to be a part of the church, because if they show up on today, if they show up in the next hour, they're going to judge us based on whether or not they like our service. And they may or they may not. It's a consumer society, you know, and if we don't hand out money to them, and if we don't tell them how wonderful they are, they may say, well, I go somewhere else and get that. I would rather teach them about Jesus and have an opportunity to teach them what church is supposed to be before they make a decision of whether they like us or not. I don't know, that's just me. But the big picture of what I'm trying to say here is that I do believe there's a harvest. Maybe Jesus' words are a statement of truth for all time. The harvest is plentiful. I believe there is at least some harvest, and that we need to know that.